400,000 Americans have died. That's more than have died in all of World War II. 400,000. This is a wartime undertaking. I am unveiling a national strategy on COVID-19 and executive actions to beat this pandemic.
President Biden is facing criticism from Republicans for issuing 30 executive orders during his first 3 days in office.
Fighting the pandemic is a top priority for this White House, so they did have many executive orders on everything from wearing masks on federal property to ensuring that people wear masks when you have interstate travel.
Other executive orders include establishing a pandemic testing board, mandatory quarantines for international travelers, and reconnecting with the World Health Organization.
Executive orders are the easy part. Getting legislation done is much harder.
President-elect Biden outlining a nearly $2 trillion spending plan to try and combat the virus and the economic downturn.
This initial rescue plan, they say, is going to be centered around spending around COVID relief, vaccinations, and ending the virus.
A group of Republican senators are proposing a smaller stimulus bill, presenting President Biden with a potential path to a bipartisan compromise.
The GOP plan is only $600 billion, and that's about a third of the $1.9 trillion package that the administration has proposed.
I'd like to be doing it with the support of Republicans, but they're just not willing to go as far as I think we have to go. If I have to choose between getting help right now to Americans or compromising on a bill that's up to the crisis, that's an easy choice.
The U.S. House of Representatives has passed the White House's $1.9 trillion stimulus package in a vote along party lines, receiving no Republican support.
Bernie Sanders is pushing for them to include a $15 minimum wage in this big coronavirus relief package, but there's some concern it could lead to job losses.
The minimum wage has got nothing to do with COVID. It's got everything to do with their liberal wish list.
I mean, we've talked so much about budget reconciliation.
Budget reconciliation.
Budget reconciliation.
Budget reconciliation.
This is a special process that allows them to pass a bill with just 51 votes, which conveniently is how many they're going to have. But it also comes with some strings attached, namely that it can only be used for revenue and spending measures.
The Senate parliamentarian has ruled that the $15 minimum wage hike that's been proposed that the president had promised cannot be included in the president's coronavirus relief package.
It simply does not comply with the special rules that they're using to pass this legislation without Republican support.
The bill ground to a screeching halt on the Senate floor.
As soon as the Senate voted to proceed with the bill, Wisconsin's Republican Senator Ron Johnson insisted the entire 628-page bill be read out loud.
President Biden's coronavirus relief bill is heading back to the House after the Senate passed it on Saturday along party line votes, with every Republican senator voting no.
Democrats are pointing out that they have bipartisan support from governors and mayors across the country. And one big reason for that is because the bill includes $350 billion for state and local governments.
The package also has 100% COBRA subsidy through September.
The bill extending a $300 per week jobless benefit boost, including direct stimulus payments to individuals, and expands the child tax credit.
They're allowing you to get that tax credit every single month rather than having to get it at the end of the year when you file your return.
This afternoon, one day ahead of schedule, Biden signed the nearly $2 trillion rescue plan that Congress passed just yesterday. The White House says Americans should start seeing their $1,400 relief checks within these next few days.
The vaccine rollout in the United States has been a dismal failure thus far.
The Operation Warp Speed only really seemed to focus on the science and ultimately the development and approval of these vaccines, but not the logistics around distribution and administration.
With regard to getting people vaccinated, the Trump administration had the vaccine for 40 days and got about 11 million people vaccinated, about 250,000 people a day. That's nowhere near where we need to be.
They say in talking to the Trump transition, they found out that things are much worse than they could have anticipated. There's no national plan, they said, simply for getting the vaccines into arms of Americans across the country.
The president has promised to provide 100 million vaccines in his first 100 days in office. Some question whether it's doable.
And that's not going to get us to anything close to the ease of some semblance of herd immunity before the fall, if not late winter 2021. So we have to increase the pace.
The Biden administration just hit their goal of 100 million shots in 100 days with more than a month to spare. And we set a record with 2.92 million vaccinations reported just today. That's a new one-day record.
President Biden moving up the timeline for vaccinations in America.
He directed states to make all adults eligible for the vaccine by May 1st. He says it is possible that small groups could begin gathering again on the 4th of July.
The White House has said the July 4th goal is an aspirational one, not for concerts on the National Mall or large sporting events, but to merge a few households. A timeline, they say, is not foolproof, but is based on when they believe vaccines will be available.
A major milestone. Half of American adults have now received at least one dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. In all, more than 200 million shots have been given. 32% of the total American adult population are now indeed fully vaxxed.
President Biden, meanwhile, is facing criticism over his conflicting messages with reopening schools, this time for setting the bar too low. His initial promise in December was to reopen the majority of schools nationwide within his first 100 days of taking office. Last month, Biden said his goal only applies to schools that teach through the 8th grade. And now the White House is adding even more fine print, saying that schools will be considered open as long as they teach in-person classes at least one day a week.
The CDC director said point blank that vaccinating teachers is not a prerequisite for opening. Across the country, several major school districts have been at odds with teachers' unions, who insist they will not send their educators into unsafe environments. The White House said it supports the new guidance. But the press secretary says the president and vice president both believe teachers should be prioritized for vaccines.
I know there are teachers listening, and the CDC has said they don't have to be vaccinated to go back to school.
We think they should be a
priority.
We think they should be a priority. The states are making decisions individually about where they will be on the list of who gets vaccinated.
President Biden also said he'd use the federal pharmacy program to prioritize the vaccination of child care workers and pre-K through 12 educators, with the goal of every teacher getting a first shot by the end of March.
Let's go now to the crisis on the southern border.
On day one, Mr. Biden signed orders to preserve and fortify the Dreamer program, to end the so-called Muslim travel ban, reverse an order that expanded deportation priorities, and stop construction of the border wall.
The number of unaccompanied minors crossing the border is rising.
The Biden administration still refusing to allow journalists inside the migrant facilities.
A federal judge in Texas has temporarily blocked President Biden's 100-day deportation ban. It's the first major blow to the president's immigration agenda.
We know that the administration has been looking into building more facilities to house these children, but the challenge becomes the fact that you do have unaccompanied minors who are being held for longer than the time that is allowed. And so that's opening this administration up to criticism, frankly, from the right and from the left.
President Biden is facing an uphill battle in Congress with his next economic proposal.
A first look at how Americans feel about President Biden's $2.25 trillion infrastructure plan showed a slight edge among supporters and overall support, by the way, for raising corporate taxes to pay for it. But the plan is much less popular than the relief bill passed earlier this year.
The White House is framing this package as a once-in-a-century capital investment paid for by permanent tax increases on corporate America.
It's mostly a new Green Deal sort of disguised as an infrastructure plan.
According to Democrats, paid leave is infrastructure, housing is infrastructure, and care work is infrastructure because it enables all other work. Just about half of the $2 trillion price tag comprises projects normally funded by Congress under infrastructure programs, plus broadband, power grids, and water pipes. Other items like rehabbing schools and housing facilities and strengthening supply chains do involve some construction, but they are non-traditional. And the largest line item, elder care, is the one that requires the most imagination.
We'll be open to good ideas and good faith negotiations. We will not be open to doing nothing. Inaction simply is not an option.
President Biden delivering his first address to a joint session of Congress. It happens this evening. Ahead of that speech, the White House releasing details for $1.8 trillion package of spending and tax cuts aimed at working families and paid for in large part by the wealthy.
The president will frame this as a historic investment in the human capital of the country, including $200 billion for universal preschool, $109 billion for 2 years of free community college, and $225 billion for a national paid family leave program. It also makes the larger earned income and dependent care tax credits permanent and extends the bigger child tax credit through 2025. Now, to offset the cost of these programs, the White House wants to close loopholes in the tax code, ramp up enforcement, and raise taxes on the rich. That includes restoring the top individual income rate to 39.6%, taxing capital gains as ordinary income for households making over $1 million, ending stepped-up basis for gains over $1 million as well.
I think you should be able to become a billionaire and a millionaire, but pay your fair share. I'm not looking to punish anybody, but I will not add a tax burden, additional tax burden to the middle class in this country. They're already paying enough.
This was a proposal of the greatest expansion of the social safety net in decades. He's proposing structural change to how the government works. But there's no question that cloaked in the language of compromise are big, bold, huge progressive ideas.
And this is a massive execution job. President Obama's plan got a lot of criticism for some very, very small mistakes. The potential for mistakes, failure of execution here is high. And if it fails, I think it will set back the cause of progressivism for several more decades. So getting it proposed is important. Getting it passed will be hard, as you guys were just talking about. But getting it executed, I think in some ways is going to be the president's biggest challenge. He's got to deliver not just passage, but actual real results for Americans and programs that people perceive are working, or else we go back to government being the enemy again.